ready to sculpt. Welcome to the Center for Creativity, or welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. If you're on the live stream, we're really happy you're here. My name is Anina Collier, the Dean of the Center for Creativity. So as I said in the first workshop, we'll have a couple announcements. My apologies if you've already heard them, but this is the last workshop of the Fall I Can't series. But don't worry, the series will start again in February, and we will be continuing with our registration system, although we now have a way that you can register for all the workshops you're interested with one form. So that will be much easier for, yes. Thank you for sticking it out with us as we develop this new system. But even though this series is ending, we do have a special event on Monday at 5:30. We will have a performance and Q&A with Rory Hoffman. Rory is a Nashville session musician who can play almost anything. He's self-taught. He's a musical genius. He has invented some of his own instruments, which he'll be bringing. And he's also a completely blind person. And he will be here as part of our Please Touch the Art programming, sponsored by the TCC Foundation. Again, it's Monday at 5:30. No registration is required for this one. So we hope you'll attend and bring your friends. There's some flyers at the check-in table. And then, Tulsa Achieves, okay? I can never say enough good things about this. This is a scholarship program that provides 2 years of free college for any young person who graduates from a Tulsa County high school, whether that's public, private, or homeschool program. They only have to have a 2.0 GPA, and they do not have to enroll full-time, but they do have to start immediately after the summer of their senior year. A lot of people wonder, what's the catch to this? There is no catch. It is simply a way to provide for an educated community. So your student can get an associate's degree for free and then transfer easily to a four-year institution if that's what they want to do, or they can just enter the workforce. If you are a young person or have a young person in your life, please pick up a postcard on the way out and get this on their radar. Make sure that they know that this opportunity is there for them. It's incredible. All right, well, I think we are all super excited. I can see you already warming up your clay. Please help me welcome Sarah Bowen. Sarah.
Thank you very much. Hello. This is what I look like. I'm wearing a mask because I have a tiny baby at home, and this is actually my first big event to be doing since she came. So thank you guys for being here for it. I am a full-time artist. I primarily work with polymer clay. It's my favorite medium, but I also teach in a variety of settings. Today, as you can tell, we are making tiny pumpkins. And because we have to bake this at the end, we have the option to bake it. You can also take it home to bake it. But we are going to be pretty, strict on time to get those into the oven. So I just want to jump right in to how we make it. And then we can kind of talk a little bit more about the medium and any questions that you have after I give you a little spiel. So from your instruction sheet, you see that the first thing that you need to do is what we call conditioning the clay. This clay is really awesome because after it's baked, it is really sturdy. It's not like ceramic that's going to shatter or air dry that's going to crumble. If you make a really compact item, it's going to last really well. It sounds like plastic once it's cooked because it does have a plasticine chemical in it that is essentially turned off once it bakes. So that's what we're doing. We're baking it in just a little tiny toaster oven. You can do it in your regular oven as well. But one of the things that is really important to get that really sturdy finished product is conditioning it adequately in the beginning. So if you roll it in your hands for just a minute, and when you go to squish it, it kind of cracks, that means that it's not ready. So you want to roll it around in your hand enough that you get to the point that you can really easily kind of press it between two fingers and not see a crack. So I've got a little bit more to go before mine is ready. So you'll also notice that depending on the color, some pigments do it worse than others. It will get onto your palm. Like those of you who've been rolling that orange for a long time, you might notice that. The hand wipes are on the table to kind of help you go between colors. So from an orange to a dark brown, it doesn't matter. But if I were to grab a white and roll that after I rolled the orange, I would turn it orange. So you can do your hand wipes in between colors. And we're all gonna make kind of the basic pumpkin together. And then I have a bunch of examples up here. I'll kind of show you while you condition. some ideas. So this one I actually kind of cut into the top of the pumpkin, took the lid off, and put a little spider in there. You could put all sorts of things in there. If you're going to do that, I do have some cutting tools up at the table. I knew not everybody needed them, but if you do, you can come grab one. I love making little hobbit doors or gnome doors. So I have one with a little door on it. You could add like bushes or a tiny spider or whatever you wanted there. Here I have a little witch. And when you're choosing what to make, think about the basic shapes that go into making it. So like her hat is essentially a flattened teardrop with just a flat circle on top. So when you're trying to decide like, oh, how do I make a hat? Kind of break it down into those basic shapes. And you don't have to make it all in one piece. Like I flattened a circle to make the brim, and then I kind of rolled a teardrop and squished it on for the hat. Here's a really basic pumpkin. I just added a little curly-Q vine and a little teardrop-shaped leaf. You could also do a basic pumpkin, but add another pumpkin with it. A little baby, a tiny, tiny pumpkin. I've got a jack-o'-lantern, which you could also do with yellow if you wanted to make it look a little glowy. I have a succulent that I planted in there. That is made entirely with that teardrop shape. So that's something that I'll show you once we finish our pumpkin shapes, because I use it for a ton of stuff, kind of basing off of that teardrop shape. And then lastly, I think of them as mums, little fall flowers planted in the pumpkin here. And I didn't make individual petals. I just flattened a little circle and then used my toothpick to press lines in to make the petals. So don't make it more complicated than it has to. The fact that it's tiny really lends itself to, I love the minute details, but sometimes they're really quite simple to make. So now that your clay is nice and warm, when you start shaping your pumpkin, you want to start with kind of an oblong shape, kind of this oval, because when we press our lines into it, we're going to naturally kind of flatten it. So what you do not want to do, and everybody's first inclination is to like scratch lines in, but that's going to lead to kind of bringing up it roughens the clay. It doesn't look very nice. So anytime you're adding lines, if you kind of press and roll, that's going to give you a nice ridge line. And when you're holding it, especially since you've just warmed it up, the more you hold it, the warmer it gets, the more it starts to squish. So be really gentle while you're getting those ridge lines in. And it says on there, do it until you like it. That's my favorite part about clay. If you don't like how it turned out, just roll it up and start over. You can do that as many times as you want. So I'm going to get my little lines in there. And if anybody out there tactily has a hard time gripping this toothpick, if you'll raise your hand, I will bring you a pokey tool here, as I colloquially call them. So if anybody needs that, anybody want that instead of the toothpick? Yeah. And if you decide you want it later, you can come grab one from the front. Or if you snap your toothpick in too, because sometimes that happens too. So just by kind of holding it and pressing those lines in, I have kind of smooshed it down into more of a pumpkin shape. If you smush yours way too much, you either go with it, because some pumpkins do look kind of disc-like, or you roll it and start again. But once you have little ridges that you like, you're going to choose which side you like as the top. I kind of had one that naturally flattened, so I'm going to let that be the bottom. I'm going to set it on my tile. Once you have a shape you like, I try to hold it as little as possible, because that holding is squishing and warming and warping. So I'm going to work with it on my tile now, and I'm going to take my toothpick, stab it in the top, and I'm going to kind of hollow it out. So that tiny little stab hole is not enough to stick a stem in. So I'm just going to hold my pumpkin and kind of swirl my toothpick like that to open up a bigger hole. So now I have this. How's everybody feeling about the ridging process? So can you pinpoint why it's not working, or what you're experiencing? Sometimes pumpkins are not symmetrical. Neither is most art. So don't aim for perfection. I don't aim for perfection. A lot of times people will ask me oh, how do you get the fingerprints out? How do you get the nail marks out? If you buy some of my items, I've been selling magnets for years around town, you have my fingerprints. Like, I don't worry about getting those off. People don't really notice them once it's art and it's out in the world. Sometimes when you're holding the pumpkin and putting in your ridgeline, it starts to twist, so you get almost like a swirl. If that is happening to you repeatedly, try working with it on your tile. Kind of flatten, give it a little flat spot. Here, I'll do it with my other example here. So I'm gonna do my little oval still, like that. I'm gonna give it a flat spot right there, and then I'm gonna start at the bottom. I'm gonna put my toothpick down at the bottom and roll it up and press like that. And then I'm just gonna leave it where it is on my tile and keep rolling, going around and rolling up. It's the fact that you're like holding it and turning it that is kind of giving it that swirl, and that does happen. Get that guy going. And sometimes I like to add, depending on if you want like a real kind of cartoony looking pumpkin, it can be very perfect lines, or we can go in and I like to add like a little half a line every once in a while, like that. Maybe one coming up from the bottom, you kind of like flatten the side, make it look like it was sitting on the ground and growing. So mine are certainly not perfect. Don't aim for that. Once you have the little shape that you like, no rush, keep going until you like it, but I'm going to show you how to do the stem. So remember, we have to warm that clay up, especially since we're using such a tiny piece. And it's the piece that's going to kind of stick up off of the pumpkin. That's going to be the most fragile part if we drop it on the ground. So we want to make sure it's nice and conditioned and ready. When I say make something compact, what I mean is like, if I were to make that little vine on this one detached from the pumpkin, like essentially like coming out, so it's attached in one way, but then it's like sticking out, if that falls on the ground, it's pretty likely gonna break. So I've pressed my vine up against the pumpkin. That's what I mean by compact. When you're adding things, kind of make sure it's stuck in multiple parts. So I'm certain that my brown is smooshed enough because I can easily squish it between two fingers and it doesn't crack. So to make a teardrop shape, which remember I said I use for a lot of things, you can start with just a sphere, a little ball. And there's a couple different ways to do it. You could either grab it between your two fingers like this and kind of roll. And sometimes when people do that, they're just pinching two sides and it just squishes it. You're actually rolling the whole thing in your hand so that you get a full 3D teardrop like that. If that is tricky, you could try doing it on your tile as well. So you take your little ball and you're gonna put pressure at an angle with your fingers. So like my finger's not gonna squish straight down, it's gonna squish down like this on the ball. So I'll put it on my tile. I'll angle my finger down and out and I'll roll. And that is also gonna give me a little teardrop shape. And you can do it on the table as well. You don't have to do it on your tile. And if anybody, I think I saw a couple people writing with Sharpie on their tile preemptively. That can come off onto the clay. And like if you set your pumpkin on top of your name when it bakes, you're gonna have a opposite like not indentation, but it'll be a mirror image of your name on the bottom of your pumpkin. So if you wrote on your tile already with Sharpie, just keep your clay off of that spot. So I have my little teardrop, however you came to it. And I'm gonna stick the pointy side down into that hole. So right now I have like a very basic little stem that has no texture to it. If I wanna add, there's a few different things we can do to add texture. We could, like this one, see how it is actually like swirled? It's like one of those stems that kind of Tim Burton outs of the pumpkin. So you can take that, kind of press it flat, and then give it a little twist, like that. Or you could just take the little flat teardrop that you made and take your toothpick and go around the outside. Remember, we're not going to scratch it. We're just going to kind of press, and that's going to give it that kind of bark look to the vine. And I gave you ample brown. If you want to use less of it, that's fine. You don't have to use all of it for the stem. You can use a smaller amount. I'm going to make a stem for my other one. What I'm seeing from here, it looks cute. Looks like everybody's doing awesome. Is anybody still having issues with the ridges? Okay, great news. All right, I think on my other one, I'm going to do it super swirly. So I'm actually going to kind of roll it out into a snake. And I'm going to give it a couple little twirls here. And then I'm going to stick it in the pumpkin. And remember, I don't want it to just be sticking off like that. That's going to be a little breakable. So I'm going to kind of flatten it down like that. So at this point, once you have a little pumpkin with a little stem, you get to decide how you want to decorate it. There's clay in the middle of every table. I know there's upwards of 8 of you at each table, so if you run out of a color, I have more up here. And one color that's not on your tray is orange, so I have some of that up here. And then I have a bunch of little leftover bits from other projects, if you can find a way to use them. I love that. You don't need a ton of the clay. So like say I want to add little vines. Just grab like a little piece of that green that's in the middle of the table, put the rest of it back, warm that up, add your vines. If anybody wants to come like look at or take a picture of one of the examples up close, if you're like, oh, I want to do this one, but I want to be able to look at it really well, you're more than welcome to do that. For the petals, so if you're doing a leaf or a succulent, I'm going to show you a little example of how to do that. So I'm going to do a little blue petal here. And at this point, since you warmed up that brown, there's a pretty good chance you have a dark pigment on your skin. You're going to want to kind of buff out your fingerprints and your palm with the hand wipe if you're going to go to a lighter color. So if you wanted to do a like teardrop petal or leaf, you're going to take a ball, just like we started the other teardrop, but the thing that's different is we're going to flatten it. So I'm going to flatten it. Don't make it too flat. See how I've still got a little bit of thickness there. And then if you look at your pincher fingers, they make a triangle where they come together. So you're going to leave that where you flattened it on your finger, come over here and pinch, kind of lightly. And that's going to bring it out into a flat, like a 2D teardrop. Sometimes when you pinch it, you just end up like giving it two separate, there's a word for it. One goes this way, one goes this way. So roll it up again, try again, and instead of pinching like all the way in, just kind of lightly press and then get that little point on there. You don't need to like fully smush it. Planes, that was the word I was looking for, 2 different planes. So once you have that, if you want to turn it into a leaf or a petal, you're going to come and take your toothpick, and I'm going to make the point go the opposite way of the point of the leaf. So my leaf is pointing this way. My toothpick is going to be pointing towards the fat side of the leaf. I'm going to come here, I'm going to press, and it actually usually kind of sticks to the toothpick. And then you can come and decide where it's going to go and just use that to press it right onto your pumpkin. So there's a little leaf. Or if you're going to do a succulent, you'd essentially make like 5 kind of big leaves, 5 medium leaves, and a few tiny leaves. And you're going to place them kind of overlapping like this. And then as you finish one size, you go up to the next size, and you get that nice little faded sized succulent. If you're doing a jack-o'-lantern, I actually start with that flat teardrop to get the triangle eyeballs. So you start, oh, here we go. You do the same thing. You do a ball, flatten it, use your little pincher fingers to give it that angle, and then you're just going to come over here and give it another angle and a third, and it gives you a triangle. If you want to get fancy with your jack-o'-lantern eyeballs and do the like triangle with the little kind of indented circle that goes up in a traditional jack-o'-lantern, you can use your toothpick and just press in the middle of the bottom, and you get that shape. For those of you who think about that you might want to either put something inside of the pumpkin or take the lid off like this and put it to the side and put something in there like that, I'm going to show you how to kind of open up that pumpkin. So you're gonna grab a tool like this. I have a variety of little, this kind of, you can't really cut yourself, but it's a blade. And what you're gonna do is you wanna come in at like a 45-degree angle. I'm not going straight in like this, and I'm not going straight down. I wanna come in like that. And I'm gonna make a cut stabbing into the center on each segment of my pumpkin that I made. So I'm gonna come over here, go into the center, turn it, come here. And remember, your little fingers are warm, so hold gently. And I'm just gonna make my way around like that, and my little top pops off. It's gonna look a little rough on the inside, but that probably doesn't matter because you're putting something in there or on there, or you're setting this to the side like that, so no one's gonna know that it looks a little choppy inside where you've cut it out. If you're trying, like say maybe you wanna put like a little kitty cat in there or a little ghost and you need a little space, you can just take your thumb and kind of lightly press, and it'll hollow it out just a little bit more for you to have more room to work with. These are tiny things, so we wanna keep it small enough that it fits on the tile. And it's baked based on density of the clay. So don't make a thing that like barely fits on the tile because it takes up the whole thing and it's this big, because that's gonna bake about twice as long. So now while you kind of work on adding your details, remember if you want other colors, you can come grab them up here, or if you need another tool, they're up here as well, don't be shy. I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about the clay and its functionality and everything. So just the fact that it lasts so long and is so durable is one of my favorite reasons that I use it. It also maintains some flexibility in the way that you could like make stop motion with it. It wouldn't be quite as good as the traditional modeling clay that people use for stop motion that never dries. But while this is fresh and recently conditioned, it can move. So I've done a lot of stop motion with it in the past. It's great for kids as well, because different brands have different, not thicknesses, but like, viscosity, hardness. So what we're using right now is Fimo Soft. It's my personal favorite. Because I think it is the strongest once it's baked. I've tried a lot of different brands. I feel like this is the most sturdy. But if you're working with kids or somebody who has maybe like arthritis and it's hard to push down on the clay to get it conditioned, something more like Sculpey Soufflé or Sculpey 3, that's another brand that you can find at Michael's or online or even Walmart. That's going to be a lot softer. So that's really great for kids that don't need a lot of, that you don't necessarily want to have to help condition every color. And I personally love, so my business is called Tiny Things by Bowen. I've been doing it for a decade, and it's been my full-time gig for 7 years. And I think that making tiny stuff, it just lends itself really well to people dipping their toe in. Some of my favorite people to work with are the ones that are like, oh, I'm not creative. And that's kind of why like this workshop series fits with me and my ideas and morals so well, because I want the people who say, oh, I can't do that, to come to my workshop and realize that they can. And realize that making something tiny is such a, it's not stressful, it's kind of silly, it's a little whimsical, and it can look however it looks. And I really love it when people get their little baked item back and they're like, oh my God, I love it. Sometimes you just need like a moment away to realize, wow, that's really great. So yeah, that's why I make tiny things. Does anyone have questions about the clay or the process? Yeah? Yes, so if you drop it and something breaks off, depending on, so like if it's just clay to clay, Gorilla Glue works great. I would just use Gorilla Super Glue. That's my favorite. I make a lot of functional items like magnets, that's one of my favorite things to make, or earrings. So if metal, Jess is rocking some of my earrings today, my assistant. If metal to clay comes apart, then you're gonna want to use actually an epoxy, so like E6 or E3000, 6,000 is really great for that, because the clay actually maintains a little bit of flexibility after it's cooked, which is you don't see in something dense like this, but like, for example, I've made little bookmarks that you can actually like bend and wiggle. So because of that, when you're gluing something else to it, you want it to have some flexibility, and Gorilla Glue doesn't. It dries hard and crispy, and if it flexes, it pops off. The epoxy, the E6000, has some of that moldability, movability to it. Any other questions, thoughts on how it's going? Yeah? She is 3.5 months, and she's kind of big for a 3.5-month-old. She's a long baby. I'm in the process of making her a onesie that says "Tiny Thing" by Bowen on it. And as you start to finish, I have trays up here that are going to go into the oven. I'm going to wait until a tray is pretty full to put it in.